His name's Trygve Hammer, and he's running for the United States Congress. You know who he is. He's a military vet. He's a man that has worked in, a million different capacities because he loves the state. Marine Corps officer, veteran of the global war on terror. He's taught school. He's worked oil in the Bakken. This is a guy who, quite frankly, brings a lot of experience to this race. Trygve, good to see you again, man. How you been?
Oh, I've been great. Happy to be here. Our North Dakota farmers and ranchers do a tremendous job of. I heard your earlier guest, and I'm trying to learn to talk in that circular way. I'm not very good at it yet.
Okay. Well, let's talk in the way that I know you are good at. Why are we at war?
Because we decided to go to war because our national command authority, the President, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, did not listen to the people who were definitely telling them what was going to happen. Nothing has happened in this war that was not predicted. When you're going into a conflict like that, you say, hey, what's the enemy's most likely course of action? What's the enemy's most dangerous course of action? And you look at those things and you plan for them. And that's what the military planners would do. That's what they ended up doing, but they all saw what was coming. And, the one thing about it is Iran now knows that do they really even need a nuclear weapon? They don't need it. All they need to do is issue a threat to close the Strait of Hormuz. And they'd be better off spending their money on more of these cheap drones and missiles and building that way. So and also it's like when the Russians went into Afghanistan and then got turned around and left, all of a sudden everybody said, look at that, the mighty Red Army isn't so mighty. And it turned things around and by and large, led to the end of the Cold War.
Yeah. Let me put it to you this way, though. You sit there and you go to war in Iran. Many people can say Israel is what drove us to that the Israelis or Benjamin Netanyahu was actually the one who decided America will go to war. We reacted that way. That being said, the year before all of this, we heard that their nuclear capabilities were gone because of the bunker-busting bomb. We had gone over and wrecked any capabilities that Iran had for nuclear empowerment, nuclear weapons. Donald Trump told us that. Then he tells us, well, we're going to go in there and we're going to help free these demonstrators who are trying to make for a better Iran. Well, we know what's happened to them. Then he tells us that we're going to make lives better for the Iranians and we're going to take out their leadership and it's going to be a more progressive leadership. We know what happened there. Then he tells us that we're going to wipe out all their nuclear capabilities. Well, we went around to that. Then he tells us now that the war will be won when we open up the Strait of Hormuz. It was open. Yep. I mean, before all this, Trig, it was open. I mean, what are the American people supposed to believe when it comes to this war?
Well, I think that's what you're seeing right now is because you can claim something and it not be true once. But when you claim it over and over and over, people are getting a little fatigued with the Strait of Hormuz being open. Oh, it's not open. And that is eroding public support. And there just wasn't that much public support for this from the very beginning. The best we could get is back to the status quo we had before this thing started.
Yeah. Okay. So the people that you are running a race to represent in the halls of Congress, they use certain things to make their living, right? They use plastics, come from oil. They use fertilizer, comes from the Middle East in many cases. Canada, in some cases, which, by the way, the administration has picked a fight with as well. Our brothers to the north. They use fuel. I mean, they need a good price on fuel. They pre-buy. I know some of these guys that are already pre-buying fertilizer just to play it somewhat safe. What are you hearing? Because you stop in every cave. You've held every town hall meeting you can. You walked into the Republican convention. I mean, what are you hearing in terms of these ag producers that I'm referencing?
Well, these ag producers, first, they would like to have their markets back that have been lost with the tariffs. Again, another thing that we predicted. And then with this Iran war, their input costs are high. If you are delivering corn in August right now, you're getting under $4 a bushel for that corn. Soybeans are under 12 with all these increased input costs. You can't make it. You've got a negative margin when you're done. And we need to straighten this out. I think Senator Hoeven said something about increasing domestic capability. Yes, we do need to do that. Short term, we need to just get ourselves out of this thing in Iran without worrying so much about what it looks like. We're going to be like, okay, let's bring in some third parties and get some kind of agreement, and then we'll work.
But we had third parties. We had NATO. We had the agreement. We had the inspections. We had something that Republicans had signed off on that President Obama brought forward. And it's no different than a lot of things that Barack Obama did when it came to the Affordable Care Act and other things. If it had Obama's name on it, it couldn't go on the arch. And it couldn't go in the reflecting pool. I mean, it seems to be driven by this I want my name on everything type mentality. And in the end, it's like the mall. You know, the grass is gone. You've wrecked it. It's like the reflecting pool, Doug. It's gone. You've wrecked it. I mean, they're just leaving this wide swath, Trygve.
Yeah, and I do want to take issue with another thing that the senator said. He talked about, our European allies need to join in, and because we're helping with Ukraine. This thing that we decided to do in the Persian Gulf is costing the world trillions, the entire world economy, probably hundreds of billions already for the United States. And, Ukraine is taking on probably our number one enemy when it comes down to it in Vladimir Putin. And when I was in Iraq, my unit was relieved by a Ukrainian unit. They, not a member of NATO, but they still came down. They relieved us in Al Qut, Iraq, when I was heading out back to Kuwait. So, Europeans don't owe us anything on this thing that we started.
So, okay, let me ask you this. When you look at what's happened in Iran, I first off, I want you to know that he's not ducking, he's not diving, neither am I. It says, ask Trygve his opinion on what Major Jason Watson did on the steps of the Capitol. Have you heard about this?
Was he the Air Force guy?
He stood there and he held up the signs and got arrested for it.
Yeah. Well, he got arrested, and you're not supposed to do that stuff in uniform. Now, Trump.
So he should have been arrested.
Yes.
I mean, that's the answer. He should have been arrested. He knew he was going to get arrested when he did it.
Right.
I mean, that's clear.
Yeah, you shouldn't be at any kind of campaign rally in uniform. You shouldn't be at any political event.
You shouldn't be behind the president clapping.
Right, and the president should never make partisan remarks to a military audience.
Yep. All right, so let me ask you this, or let me point out this text message. It says, good job nailing him on the war part. I can't believe he has to look into the benefits part. He's been there long enough to know better. He's full of it. Thus, John Hoven, your thoughts on that? And here's what the reference is, Trygve. I raised the question of these individuals who had died in this war, these soldiers whose families, as it sits right now without some special action, are not going to receive the benefits a wartime casualty would receive. How in the world can you look these families in the eye and say that's okay?
Well, it's not okay, and they need to be listed as killed in action in this conflict. There is no other place for them to go. And I think it was just the administration trying to save face, like, oh, technically it was after this operation. So yeah, they're not part of that group. And it's disgusting, right? When it comes right down to it,
it's all about not admitting there's casualties of his war.
Right. And
that's what it's about, right?
Yep. And what I hear from a lot of guys younger than me, guys who are vets of the global war on terror, is that, we went to Iraq under false pretenses, and we thought this was never going to happen again. When we had Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld say, going into Iraq, it was, 6 days, 6 weeks. I hardly think it'll be 6 months. And we were there years. And they feel like, the active duty people now are being pulled into that same thing. We're repeating the mistakes because somebody didn't learn that lesson.
He's taking your messages, and there are a ton of them here. Trygve Hammer is in the house, retired Marine Corps officer, veteran of the global war on terror, and he's running for Congress in the state of North Dakota. Trygve, in terms of national debt, how big of a concern of that is it to you?
That is huge. And also, it was when Julie Fedorchak got into the race in 2024, she said that was her number one concern. And now she's voted to blow it up. And I have kids, probably going to have grandkids at some point. They are going to end up, we're paying more and more to service this debt. And I want to leave them with something better. That's what all my reasons for running boil down to, is leaving something better for them.
If you had a family member that was spending too much money, and you could see they were leaving debt all over the place, debt that they couldn't pay, never coming out of credit card debt, would you talk to that family member?
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, you'd help, right?
You need counseling.
Yeah. You wouldn't say, hey, I'll borrow you more money. Right. That's how we'll solve this is you're 100 short, I'll give you 100. I mean, that isn't how you get that family member to quit spending money. Fair?
That's fair.
Our system of government, is Congress supposed to be the one that says to the person that's spending too much money, no, you don't get any more money?
Yeah, Congress controls the purse strings, but the problem is now we have the most cowardly Congress we have ever seen. They don't want to make any hard decisions. They're ceding all the power to the executive branch. And even our governor, Republican Kelly Armstrong, said Congress needs to take back its power. Well, guess what? You're not going to do that with Julie Fedorchak. She's already shown that.
Well, let me give you an example of what we're talking about. The national debt just hit a record high of $40 trillion. $40 trillion. Under the Trump presidency, that's 5 years now. That isn't 8 years. That's 5 years that this has been calculated under his presidency. Of that debt, 28.6% of it was accumulated under a Republican Congress under Donald Trump. 28.6% was brought by individuals like the one you're running against right now. So when you hear a Julie Fedorchak say, I'm fiscally conservative, what do you think of?
I think of, a nation that is going deeper in debt at the same time that many people in this nation are starting to feel like they're getting underwater in debt. And it's a huge problem, and we need to turn it around fast. It's probably our number one controllable man-made problem right now.
The Hammer's in the house. Trygve Hammer, ladies and gentlemen, he's running for the United States Congress against Julie Fedorchak. I said if they hung in there, they get first crack at him. Let's do it. Janelle, you are on with Trygve. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. Hey, hi, Joel. Hi, Trygve. Trygve, I met you once at a party, like a watch party or something, so I don't really know you, but I'm an avid supporter. We need a change in this state. I'm so tired of our representation not answering questions. And when I heard Fedorchak and Hoeven wouldn't come on, I just sent a message, Trygve will come on, because why not? It's just the truth is all you have to tell. We need a change. And what I'd like to talk to him about is this Doge thing. So what I have found out is coming out of USAID, 14 million people across the globe are going to die by 2030. Is that true?
Yes, I've heard those numbers as well. We're already up to around estimated 700,000 children between the ages of 0 and 5. And the thing to know about that is independent expenditures in 2024 by USAID were 0.3% of the federal outlays.
I know. It's like in our taxes, from what I understood, that it would cost me $32 to $40 a year to keep USAID going. And shame, shame, shame. You are not pro-life if you support this regime.
Okay. Thank you, Janelle. Appreciate the call. I want to get to Steve. Steve, you're on with Trygve.
What I'd like to ask Trygve, and good morning, is how does he differ from the National Democratic Party?
Great question.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Well, I actually don't pay that much attention to the National Democratic Party because I know they're not going to be weighing into this race. And that's actually, in a way, I could be their worst nightmare when I show up in the U.S. House, because here's a guy who, got nothing from the DCCC, No one thought he was going to win. He doesn't owe anybody anything. And everywhere I've gone, I've talked about we cannot think about these ideological boxes. We can't take every solution doesn't have to come from a conservative or a progressive or a liberal or, a government solution or a free market solution. We've got to be free of that ideological boxes so that we can make good decisions based on the evidence in front of us. And,
addressing those ideological boxes, do you differ from the party on men and women's sports? Do you differ from the party on unfettered abortion? Do you differ from the party on anything? I mean, can you just name one thing that you differ from the national platform?
Okay, so I have said that biological men shouldn't be competing in women's sports. But I've also said there's a difference between chess and wrestling, between fourth grade intramurals and the Olympics. So let's let all of these athletic communities take care of this issue by themselves, like North Dakota High School Activities Association, the school boards, whatever level they're at, then they can decide who's competing in what sports. Congress has so many bigger fish to fry right now, but I have said it, that biological men should not be competing in women's sports.
Steve, does that answer your question?
It does, to some extent, yes. And thank you very much for taking my time.
No, thank you for calling in, Steve. Appreciate it. Trygve, end the war.
End the war. All right, well, I think we have to come to an agreement. We need to bring in Pakistan and those nations that have actually formed, the Sunni Muslim nations in the area that have formed kind of a compact now, and we need to talk with all of them and hand it off and say, hey, we're gonna clear out. Let's have the Strait of Hormuz open. Let's set a date where it's free flowing all the way up to that date, and then we will not be the ones negotiating. Because part of the problem is, the Iranians, they are hardly a stable person to deal with, the entity to deal with. But right now, the United States isn't either. There's a deal, and then there's a Truth Social post that blows up that deal. That has to stop happening. So we need to get out of there. What we've seen with the Abraham Lincoln out there, all those days in the Persian Gulf, which high temperature, high salinity, hard on the ship, hard on the sailors. What's really hard is not having that end date when you're going to leave. And they for a long time didn't have that. And when one sailor is desperate enough to jump off the ship, how many of his peers are then not going to re-enlist after coming home with that deployment
experience? I hadn't
experience?
thought of the re-enlist. I hadn't thought of that. I had thought of the backlash in terms of speaking to families and the price that families pay, and the public side when you're in a war of comfort to the enemy type of a thing. I hadn't thought of the fact that so many of these guys are going to say, nope, I'm not doing it again.
Yeah. And I've had people in my social media say, well, we should just bomb them into submission. We should just nuke them. We should, what are we if we do that? If we're going to be that shining city on a hill, it's not because we're nuking every country that gets in our way.
If tomorrow the Iranians opened up the Strait of Hormuz, did we win?
Well, we're back where we were. No, we didn't win, because look at what we've been paying at the gas pump. Look what we're paying in the grocery stores. Look at those inputs for fertilizer and everything that our ag producers have had to pay, which those are not going to come down immediately. That is going to take a while. We've done great damage to our own economy and the world economy, and we need to fix it, and it's going to take a while. But I wouldn't call it a win. If anyone has won, it's China, because the George Washington is pulling out of the South China Sea to come replace the Abraham Lincoln. When my son-in-law was deployed out to the South China Sea on a destroyer, they had Operation Midnight Hammer, great name for an operation, and his ship, that carrier group, got pulled out of the South China Sea over to the Persian Gulf. We are abandoning that place where China wants more influence. And the Chinese also had had lots of oil on board. So they're the ones probably benefiting the most from this entire thing.
Trump says that that the CNN report about the soldiers on the Abraham Lincoln is fake. Your answer to that?
Everything is fake news if you don't like it. That's ridiculous. We know that one sailor jumped off, and we know that sailors don't regularly jump off of aircraft carriers, 60 feet from the deck to the waterline.
We also know that a lot of family members have also came forth and said, look, basic hygiene products, other things like that, they don't even have. So I remember Pete Hegseth showing lobster and steaks at a big function he had at the Department of War, as they call it, but Department of Defense, and him saying, when criticized how much money he was spending on that meal, him saying, well, don't you think soldiers should eat that well? Well, my question of you is this. Having been in one of those uniforms, do you believe that the people on the Abraham Lincoln are eating that well?
No, they're not. We are totally letting them down. A lot of that's because there was a resupply base in Bahrain that was hit by the Iranians, and just partly because you're not supposed to be out on the deployment cycle that long without getting into a port where it's easier to replenish.
Does Congress, do they belong involved in data centers?
Congress and data centers. Well, Congress, let's look at AI at large. Congress definitely needs to be involved. These AI data centers are, Bernie Sanders has called for a moratorium. I don't know if I would go that far, but I'm pretty close to that right now, because what we've seen with AI is people in the United States do not trust these big AI companies. They don't right now trust Congress to properly regulate those AI companies because Congress just has no courage to do anything. And these big corporations, what they're doing, take Uber, for example. They have drivers who they bid for, they have to accept a fare. And Uber is using AI surveillance to drive their fares down, like to test them to see how low they'll go in accepting a fare. And the same thing is happening with contract nursing. There are 4 companies with apps that do contract nursing now across the United States, and they actually go out and get nurses' credit card data. They buy it from data brokers, and then they look for nurses who are in debt, and then they offer them these desperation wages. So
we're not in debt, but my wife does contract nursing, so I don't want them looking at my credit cards. But yeah, they're going to find out I buy some sports items they don't need to know. I mean, my new shoes that I've got on my Brooks, they don't need to know that. So,
so they're driving down wages, driving up prices in the same manner, and Congress has got to get on the ball and look at our AI future.
Question comes in by text. You talk about ag trade with Canada. Why is it okay for Canada to have tariffs on our ag products going to them, but not on theirs coming here? Talk about fair trade.
Well, fair trade is, I believe, is what we had before. And every country looks at tariffs in a different way, but, going across the board tariffs is, taking a baseball bat to a problem that requires a tweezers. And when I was on the railroad, I brought down potash from Canada on a regular basis. I go up to Portal, grab a train, take it down, and drop it off at Enderlin. And so that is a vital trading partner. And we had the USMCA, and we make our agreements on there. And then from that, everything should be predictable. We shouldn't be starting any kind of trade wars. So, exactly which of our products Canada is putting tariffs on, I don't know.
So a question comes in. It says, how often did our dads not have hygiene products in World War II? I think their point is the U.S. Abraham Lincoln, people like me are saying they should have hygiene products and they're saying, well, in World War II, our dads didn't have any. Your thoughts on that?
One, I really doubt that that's true. Now, 2, when I got to Iraq in 2003, we got care packages a lot of times, and so I would shave with shampoo and a like a safety razor that came in those boxes. And so, but we did have some. I took showers with bottles of water. That was the only way we had to get ourselves clean. But I wasn't on a ship. You got to understand when you go down to your berthing, and if you're junior enlisted on the USS Abraham Lincoln, you have about a shoulder width space between your bunk and the locker on the other side. And then depending on where you are, there's bunks either above or below you, and you have about a 2-foot gap to slide into your bunk, close the curtain, and that's all the privacy you get. The showers are little nozzle things that you can spray yourself wet, soap up, spray yourself off, and you can do that for a while. But after a while, you need to get off onto port and hop in a real shower, walk around on land for a while, and the length of this thing, and also, World War II, we were in a full-blown war. Supposedly, this conflict isn't even a war, and we have a ship out there. It's a floating city at sea, 5,000 sailors and Marines, and they're running out of those products. They got mold in the showers, and it's partly because of that operating environment.
Somebody wants to know, will Hammer support a Trump impeachment on his first day?
That is a very good question. I think I would say no. And I'll tell you why. Because we have so many big things that we have to take care of, and we know that the Senate will never vote to convict. But we can start holding people accountable. We can start having those hearings and doing real oversight. That's where we need to start. We need to find out who is trading on the Trump social media posts and making a bunch of money on the oil markets and in the stock market while we're paying more at the supermarket.
I want to make sure while we have Trygve Hammer that he has a chance to respond to some of the grifting. Senator John Ossoff of Georgia said this.
Above all, Donald wants to get money. How much have you heard about the president's stock trading? When he first announced the tariffs, you remember that? He called it Liberation Day. And it crashed the markets because it was clown policy. You remember that? Okay, so follow me through on this. He announces the tariffs on April 2nd of last year. The markets tank nonstop for like a week because it's a disastrous trade policy. And 6 days into the crash, April 8th, Trump buys millions in stock. I'm talking Amazon, Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Berkshire Hathaway. And then the very next morning, April 9th, he posts on Truth Social, quote, "This is a great time to buy." 3 exclamation marks. Okay, now listen to this. 3 hours and 41 minutes after that post, 1 day after he bought millions in stock, he canceled the tariffs and triggered one of the biggest same-day rebound rallies in market history. He's trying to get money. And you saw, now he's offering paid subscriptions to presidential announcements, right? Just understand what's for sale here. The sitting president's pronouncements on war and peace and economic policy delivered first to paying customers? What an absolute crook.
Trygve Hammer, your thoughts?
Well, this is exactly what I was talking about, holding those folks accountable. It's the politics is awash in money, and that insider trading, we've seen it in oil and everything else. So, yeah, this is a definite problem, and people are just sick of it. As they're struggling to pay for gas, pay for groceries, and they see all this grifting happening, all this money going into folks' pockets.
We have a little bit of time left. A text message comes in and says Trump will prolong the war through November so he can write an executive order to cancel the midterms. He will use the excuse that we are in a war and cannot hold an election. About 40 seconds.
I believe he might wish to do that. He might have that fantasy, but it will never work. It just won't happen. But will he prolong the war? I think he might prolong the war, but not even on purpose. I think just trying to save face and get out of it in a way that makes it look like we won is becoming harder and harder. So, I think this war might be going on through November, but it won't be for that reason.
By getting us into this war, did he lie to the country?
Yes, they lied about why it was happening through Benjamin Netanyahu, I would say, and and that's why AIPAC spends all this money to get the Congress they want.
Well, you're not supposed to speak ill of people that are gone to the great beyond, but Lindsey Graham was big hand of that as well. Trygve, your website?
Hammerfornd.com. That's hammer, FORND.com.
There you go.